In January of 49 BC, Julius Caesar and his army approached the river Rubicon after being ordered by Rome to disband. To cross the river Rubicon into Italy while in command of a fighting force was forbidden, and it carried with it a death sentence, not just for the man who gave the order, but also for every single man who followed. Caesar knew this was his last chance to turn around. If he crossed, there was no going back. This was the point of no return. When he and his men crossed the river, Caesar famously said, "The die has been cast." And this act began a civil war in Rome that Caesar eventually won and changed the course of history. I believe 2023 was the year Ireland crossed the Rubicon. Ireland has always been a medium-sized country with a small-town mentality. Having heterodox opinions and straying from the pack has always been something very strongly discouraged in Ireland. Where most countries would have a general consensus on issues, Ireland seems to have had a near universal consensus on issues. For decades, public opinion in this country has been decided by a very small elite group of politicians, journalists and academics. If you wanted TV news, you had two options. If you wanted print, you had a small handful of newspapers. If you wanted a choice of political representation, you had two parties who share 90% of the same worldview, and their most defining difference goes back to their opinions on the Anglo-Irish Treaty over 100 years ago. And the people who made up these political parties and media organisations all went to the same colleges, go to the same social clubs, they have friendly, non-adversarial, but instead codependent relationships, and in some cases, they are directly funding one another. For decades, the media class has seen their role not as providers of news and information, but as people who control what information you can see and decide exactly how you're supposed to react to it. The politicians see themselves not as elected representatives tasked with the job of enacting the will of the people, but instead see themselves as your rulers who've been tasked with the job of deciding what's best for you, whether you like it or not. They see your vote not as permission to represent you, but as permission to rule you. For as long as I have been alive, this has been the case. 2023 was the year this hold over the Irish people ended. I've seen people arguing over what caused this hold over the Irish psyche to break. They argue between immigration, crime, housing and hate speech legislation. While all of these played a pivotal role, the tip of the spear was the COVID crisis. COVID was the first break in the chain. It began with the worst of Ireland's small-town consensus-based mentality, where we had the longest lockdowns in Europe, some of the worst, most nonsensical restrictions imaginable. €9 magic chicken wings to stop COVID, anyone? And not a word of protest or a contrary opinion dared be uttered in the press, politics or even private life for months, lest you be labelled a conspiracy peddling granny killer. However, that all changed during 2021. People began to protest, people began to question RTE and NPHET, people began to call out the lies in the media. There was a movement of people who noticed the inconsistencies, half-truths, smear jobs and fear porn being peddled on a daily basis. I mean, I think we all know of people whose worldview totally shifted during COVID. People who began 2020 saying, we need to clap for the healthcare heroes, we need to hold firm, stop the spread, and by the end of 2021, their worldview had totally shifted and they were basically saying,
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
COVID was the first time there was a significant minority of people who realised they were being lied to, and once you take that red pill, there's no going back. So while 2022 was supposed to be the year of returning to normal, 2023 showed that there is no going back to normal. 2023 showed that the people who saw how they were lied to before weren't just going to sit back and accept being lied to again. This discontent and distrust of the Irish establishment has been built largely around one issue: immigration. Immigration is the issue which embodies this new dissident anti-establishment movement in Ireland, because it has been the same issue that has been at the heart of most anti-establishment movements throughout Europe for decades, from Brexit to the National Front in France, to Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, to the Sweden Democrats, the AFD in Germany, and many others. However, for a long time it was very successfully repressed in Ireland. In 2020 we had a general election, and you'd be hard pushed to find 5 articles expressing any sort of opinion on immigration levels, despite the number one issue in the country at the time being housing. But in 2023, this issue broke down the wall of narrative control the establishment has had over the Irish people. Although it wasn't through lack of trying on their part. They smeared the people of East Wall as far right. They called anyone who protested racist. They called concerned parents conspiracy theorists. They said the people noticing the problem were the real concern. They had their lackeys in the media do hit piece after hit piece after hit piece. And what was the result of this veritable blitzkrieg of attacks from all sides of politics, the media and academia? A 75% belief amongst the Irish public that immigration is too high and should be reduced. It has become a regularly discussed issue on TV, radio, newspapers and podcasts, and media trust is getting lower every single year. Their attacks have not only failed, but they've boomeranged back on them. 3/4 of the Irish people are utterly at odds with every single government and opposition party on what is becoming the biggest issue in the country. This has caused mainstream parties' poll numbers to either tank or plateau. In less than a year, we've gone from having Minister for Housing Darragh O'Brien saying that he will put no limit on the number of people arriving here and implying strongly it was bigoted and even immoral to suggest a cap, to Taoiseach Leo Varadkar saying Ireland is very much at its limit and even slashing welfare and accommodation benefits for Ukrainians arriving here. Even Sinn Féin are realising their support for open borders is hurting their prospects of being in government and are quietly shifting their position. That's not to say immigration is the only issue that Irish people have opposed the establishment on, but it is the one that connects to most of the other taboo issues, and it being begrudgingly accepted as a legitimate topic for discussion has snowballed into a new movement that will question every single thing this government and media tells them. The hate speech legislation and its authoritarianism was a big story this year, and it made international news, with many people seeing that law being passed to silence criticism of the impacts of large-scale immigration and multiculturalism, which inevitably lead to a more divided and less cohesive society that people don't want and never voted for. The trials of murderers Joseph Puska and Yusuf Palani, along with a series of other violent crimes, have caused people to question the impact immigration is having on crime. Even our membership of the EU is beginning to be questioned, something that would have been unthinkable just 5 years ago. 2023 was the year when the monopolistic control the establishment had over the Irish people ended, and that spells big things for 2024. If 2023 was the year the Irish people found their voice, then 2024 will be the year they make that voice heard. With trust in media, politicians and institutions all collapsing, this creates a vacuum, and what fills that vacuum has yet to be decided. For about 2 decades, in the wake of the church receding from public life, it has been accepted that modern Ireland would be a progressive, multicultural, left-wing, globalist country.
No one can call Ireland a conservative country now. This is the moment it became official. The counting complete, confirmation the Irish people had decisively voted to include same-sex marriages in their constitution.
2023 was the first time that narrative has been properly challenged, and 2024 will be the year that challenge takes real form. This is why things are going to get ugly in 2024. The establishment forces who are losing ground aren't just going to give up their power and influence voluntarily. They're going to double down on their positions. So the cries of far right, racist, conspiracy theorist, fascist, homophobe, transphobe, and a cavalcade of hit pieces are going to be thrown at anyone they view as a threat with a vigor not yet seen, because they know they cannot just dismiss these people anymore. In 2024, they could be a real threat to their power. There are also 2 significant opportunities for both sides to seize ideological territory. Firstly, the local and EU elections. While these will still be dominated by establishment parties, there will be a series of independent candidates who, if they could win, will show that electoral victory may be possible in the face of relentless mainstream smear campaigns. Secondly, and I think most significantly, the upcoming referendums on family and gender. Now, were these referendums held pre-COVID, they would have passed by a landslide. However, in 2024, with a growing anti-establishment movement, that's not the case at all. The government has also put themselves in the precarious position of having to answer the seemingly unanswerable question of what is a woman and to define what a family is. These answers will inevitably be unsatisfactory to a huge percentage of the country who still hold traditional values. If these referenda are shot down, it will be a global signal that Ireland will not be going down the progressive path it has been prescribed without a fight. I see 2024 being the year where the battle for Ireland's future really kicks off. The establishment will fight tooth and nail to stop this battle from happening, but it's too late for that. The people they forced to lock down aren't going away. The people they forced to take a shot aren't going away. The people they called racist aren't going away. The people they called far right aren't going away. The people they called conspiracy theorists aren't going away. The people whose homes have been transformed by migration aren't going away. The people who can't afford a home aren't going away. The victims of violent crime are not going away. All of these people who were abused, lied to and smeared are never going to blindly believe the powers that be again. And as much as the Irish establishment wishes this wasn't the case, I'm afraid it is. The Rubicon has been crossed. There's no going back. The die has been cast.